Now the Mountain Gun series is a gun that really goes a long way back with me personally. I got one for Christmas when I was 18 years old. And that was my first big bore double action revolver that I owned. And I carried and shot that gun, ever since then. And so the Mountain Gun has always been very special to me. It's a gun that I've always loved, and I'm so happy we can bring it back. But not only bring it back, but bring it back better than ever before. So the Mountain Gun is an iconic series from Smith Wesson. It originally came out in the 1980s. Gunwriter Ross Seifried and Tommy Campbell from Smith Wesson got together in a room one night and kind of talked about what they thought would be a great project. And Ross was adamant about having a tapered barrel like the old classic 44 specials of the 1940s and 50s, and having that black powdered chamfered front of the cylinder. And Tommy kind of went to work around that and came out what we know now as the Mountain Gun, which is basically a 4-inch tapered in-frame revolver, round butt, black powder chambered front cylinder. And so you have a real lightweight field gun that's just great to pack and just still easy to shoot because it's still steel. It's not made out of the super lightweight scandiums and such. So for our initial launch, we're gonna offer 2 different models. The classic 629, which is your 4-inch 44 Magnum, and the 686 Plus Mountain Gun, which is built on the L frame, so a little bit smaller and lighter, and it's a 7-shot 357 Magnum. Now they've only made one run of those guns back in the late 90s, and they're highly sought after. If you really want a super cool 357 Magnum Smith & Wesson revolver, this 686 Mountain Gun is the gun for you. One thing I'm super excited about with the 686 Mountain Gun is that Smith & Wesson did a few things to really make this probably the strongest and most durable 686 they've ever made. First, they added a ball detent lockup on there. So it's a little bit more solid lockup than the traditional lockup. And they also beefed up the forcing cone area like they did on the Smith & Wesson Model 69 on these guns. So these guns really should be just bomb-proof, sleek, lightweight 357 Magnum revolvers. So when we were talking to Smith & Wesson about doing this project, one of the things that always kind of kept going to the back of my mind is that I wanted to make this factory offering one that's kind of what you have from a custom option. So years and years of me shooting my gun, I changed the grips constantly, changed the sights, and I really kind of settled in on a package that really worked well and was not only that shot well, but was aesthetically pleasing. And we really wanted to offer that as a factory offering as well. So we teamed up with Tyler Gunworks to come back with some really nice grips for these guns. They've got the pattern to the old bear hug grips, which are, those grips came back out in the late 60s. You gotta remember, during that time, that's when people shot double action revolvers. There was, they had auto pistols, you had 1911s and high powers, but we didn't have the polymer craze that we have today. And almost all law enforcement and most civilians use double action revolvers in their everyday life. So guys back then knew how to make grips to work well for that type of shooting.
So I'm Bobby Tyler with Tyler Gunworks out in Freona, Texas. So the bear hug grip originated back in the late 60s with a huge influence of Skeeter Skelton. And so being able to take this product and relate it to modern shooters on these new revolvers was a no-brainer. So we've been familiar with and handled the bear hug grips for years, but the ability now for us to actually own the rights to the bear hug grips and produce them has been a game changer for our product. After deliberating on several materials, we decided to go with a good American walnut. So going with a high-grade walnut was a no-brainer for us on this project. For years now, we've been building grips, custom grips only. This is actually our first time to go through the production series to build them for manufacturing. Before that, everything's been hand-fitted, each pair one at a time. And through that, it's allowed us to come up with a lot of different models, things that do work, things that don't work. And one of the things that we've found throughout the years is some of the things from the past that just haven't survived are some of the things that we all covet and look for.
Now, one other thing we really wanted to do was to make that front sight a little bit more visible. The traditional mountain gun just had a ramp serrated sight, which works good, but a lot of times in my experience using my gun out in the field, when things kind of got dark and dim, it was hard to pick that sight up. So we went to a gold bead style front sight, and Smith & Wesson did a great job of designing the sight exactly the way we wanted it. We wanted something that was a 125 width, that had a slanted serrated front with a nice gold bead on the top. So not only can you get a nice clean sight picture, you can see it in low light conditions. The mountain guns generally knock 3 to 4 ounces off of what the traditional heavier barrel version of the same model would be. So it makes it a little bit lighter, a little bit easier to pack around. The kind of guys who like a nice steel frame revolver, this is really the gun for them.
So one of the key requests that Jason had with these mountain gun series was to not have an internal lock in those revolvers. It actually required re-engineering of some of the internal components of the revolvers to allow us to bring those new revolvers to market. Jason also had a number of other requests that he wanted to cover off to make sure these mountain guns were the very best mountain guns that Smith & Wesson has brought to market. He wanted to ensure that we had chrome flash hammers and triggers. We showed Jason an initial concept for the tapered barrel. Jason ensured that he wanted a one-piece barrel for these revolvers, not the two-piece, which we see in a lot of current modern Smith & Wesson revolvers. And the initial concept, Jason wasn't quite happy with the actual external dimensions and cosmetic look of it. So we went back, Smith & Wesson Engineering went back and re-engineered that. They went through actual multiple variations to come out with the final product, which we're all very happy with. So although on the face of it, this project may look like it was easy, the reality is this project has been in the works for 2 years, and it's been a lot in the last 12 months of very close coordination between Smith & Wesson, LIPSEY'S, and Tyler Gun Works to ensure that we can bring the very best mountain gun to the market.
So there's a lot of customers for this gun. One is the person who just likes a good revolver for a field gun. That's what the mountain gun was originally designed for. That gun that you could carry on your belt in a good leather holster and be out in the field and it not weigh you down. The other customer that we're looking at too is a person who collects mountain guns. The mountain gun series were made from the late 80s up until about 20 years ago. And there was a few different cartridges or different chamberings that they came in and a couple different frame sizes. And there's a lot of guys who collected those guns. So now we have a model that's actually kind of almost like a deluxe model mountain gun for them to enjoy as well.
So one thing over the 20 years plus in this industry that I continuously get asked, working promotions and dealer events, has been, when is Smith going to bring back true classic revolvers? One of those, especially being asked, is the mountain gun.
These guns shoot fantastic. Smith & Wesson did a really good job of putting these together. And I tell you what, the flash chrome parts, in my experience, on the hammer and the trigger, really tend to smooth out really well. And the more you shoot them, the more they slick up. We went with the narrow trigger and the narrow hammer because guys who know who shoot double action a lot know that that's just a better setup than the target style hammer and trigger that on some of the other models that are out there. The bear hug grips, they handle recoil extremely well. The way that they're sculpted and the palm swells fit your hand, the gun doesn't want to squirm as much as a more rounded grip does. The grips also work really well if you're a left-handed shooter. They are relieved for a speed loader, so speed loader cut. You can use, we use the HKS style speed loaders in these guns. They worked fantastic. These guns are really just built to be used. Not only do they look really good, they're meant to be put out in the field, and nothing would make me happier than to see people out there in a nice leather holster packing one of these out in the mountains. The internal lock's been in Smith & Wesson guns that have exposed hammers since 2001. And I know it's been kind of a sticking point for a lot of people who are into Smith & Wesson revolvers, and I'm super happy to announce that this gun does not have the lock. Now you're taking the features and the parts that were really the classic guns from the 1950s with the tapered barrels, the narrow hammers and triggers, the more sculpted look, and you're combining them with modern technology like the endurance package that Smith & Wesson put into the Model 29s and 629s in the 1990s, and the stainless steel components. So you're kind of getting the best of both what the modern Smith & Wesson has to offer with the classic lines of the Smith & Wesson of old. And I'm super excited for being able to team up not only with Smith & Wesson, but with Tyler Gun Works to make these guns, I think, the best ones they've made ever. This is just a start, doing these type of projects and adding all these extra features. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, but I think on this one, the end results are definitely worth it.